Okay, so let's go ahead and shift over to our last topic here for the day, and that is the Rupnik situation. So speaking of cringy art, Rupnik is known for his very cringy art for some wild reason. A lot of quarters of the Catholic Church have used and made use of his cringy art. I don't know why. I don't see it's. Then again, I don't like modern art. So I just don't really connect with anything Rupnik has done. But again, Rupnik has also been accused and has admitted to doing certain abusive things with various women that he has also absolved in the confessional to make it even more horrible. So clearly this guy doesn't belong in ministry at all. And yet there is a diocese who has incarnated him. But Pope Francis has kind of put a halt on things. Not put a halt, has rather opened up the situation again by re-examining him. So Pope Francis has done the right thing because there was a statute of limitations situation going on with him. He lifted that so that they could go ahead and investigate him and make a judgment on him. So Pope Francis did the right thing there. I was happy that he did that, but that was a year ago. And we still don't have a judgment on Rupnik, and that's ridiculous. The guy doesn't belong in ministry at all, period. End of story. According to biblical standards and canonical standards, he does not belong in ministry. How insane can you be to continue to allow him to be a priest? Are you kidding me? It's ridiculous. Not only that, it's ridiculous to continue to keep his art out there because it sends the wrong message. If you keep his art out there, it sends the wrong message to the survivors of abuse. So get rid of it. It's ugly. It sends the wrong message to the survivors. There's no reason to keep it around or keep him around. It's an absolute shame that it is even taking this long to examine his case. Why? I don't know. I don't think there's a good reason for it. But let's take a look at what some are saying about the situation here. All right. So victims feel betrayed as Vatican investigation of Rupnik hits 1 year with no answers. Understandable. That's reasonable for them to feel that way. I totally get it. They should feel that way. Shame on the Vatican for taking this long. This should have taken 2 days at the most, maybe 1 day. It doesn't take long to say this guy doesn't belong in ministry, period, end of story, move on. 1 year after the Vatican announced it would open a canonical case on Father Rupnik, an artist and former Jesuit accused of spiritual, psychological, and sexual abuse. Victims say they feel disappointment and betrayal at the church's lack of response and transparency. Yeah. Talk about a lack of transparency. We continue to have this issue with many quarters in the church. And we continue to have this issue of not taking the abuse crisis seriously. Rupnik has been accused of abusing adult women who were under his spiritual care as part of religious community he helped found in the late 1980s and early 90s. Some of these accusations became public through the media in early December 2022, although the priest superiors and officials at the Vatican were aware even several years earlier. While the investigation of and trial of Rupnik is still pending, the priest remains free to exercise his ministry in the Diocese of Koper, Slovenia, where he was accepted in 2023. Shame. Absolute shame. Ridiculous. That's absurd. It's inexcusable, and it completely removes any ability to say that we're taking the abuse crisis seriously when we do this. There's just no way to be taken seriously. A year ago on October 27, days before the close of the 2023 Assembly of the Synod on Synodality, the Holy See Press Office published a statement saying that Pope Francis had waived the statute of limitations allowing the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith to open a disciplinary case against the now disgraced priest. And I'm glad that Pope Francis did that. He did the right thing. The Pope is firmly convinced that if there is one thing the church must learn from the Synod on Synodality, it is to listen attentively and compassionately to those who are suffering, especially those who feel marginalized from the church. Yes. But nobody is actually going to feel that anything is being taken seriously when it has taken over a year to issue a judgment and it still hasn't been issued. A full year later, as the second session on the Synod of the Synod on Synodality concluded, its final report published October 26 called for healing, reconciliation, and the rebuilding of trust in light of the scandal of different kinds of abuse. Yeah, there will be no healing and no building of trust as long as this stupidity continues to go on in the Vatican and anywhere in the Catholic Church, especially the Vatican. No trust will be earned. None. Rupnik's case is still open in the DDF's disciplinary section, which handles a wide array of church cases from the sexual abuse of minors to excommunications for schism, as in the matter of Archbishop Vigano this summer. Why is it taking so long? A person working inside the section who asked to not be named told CNA that the DDF does not usually comment on open cases, but is looking at the merits of Rupnik's case and examining the procedural steps that could be taken and the mechanism by which justice can be served. I'm sorry. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. If we're going to be serious about addressing the abuse crisis, you don't have to do all of this. You don't. And if there's some kind of canon law, there's some kind of canonical issue here, Pope Francis can dispense with that easily. Just have a quick meeting with him. Hey, there's this other deal in the way. Let's address this. We already know he's guilty. He admitted to it. He shouldn't be in ministry, period, end of story. There's no excuse for it. The DDF wants to be sensitive, respecting the process that we're doing, the person said, highlighting that all of the DDF's abuse cases are treated with equal care and attention. I understand that. I get that. But this one has so much more visibility than others. I'm not saying that that's right. Every case, I get it. They're equal. Every victim is equal. I get it. What I'm saying, though, is this is all in the media. So you don't want to send the wrong message by dragging your feet over a year. Some of Rupnik's alleged victims and advocates for victim survivors of abuse have indicated that a lack of transparency around Rupnik's case and its progress is causing pain and scandal. Exactly. We should have transparency in where we're at on this. What's taking so long? There should be some kind of conference with the press to say, hey, here's what's going on. Frankly, there's no excusable reason for the delay. Zero, but at least be transparent enough with people to tell people what your ridiculous excuse is. Jesuit Hans Zollner, an expert on abuse prevention, told CNA via email from Colombia that he had no information on Rupnik's case at the DDF, but uncertainty, lack of information, or lack of transparency in any kind of procedure creates much discomfort and potentially a lot of anxiety in victims of trauma as it triggers the memory of the hurtful experience. Absolutely. So you have that situation with the survivors of the abuse. You also have the fact that everybody else who's looking at this sees that we're not taking it seriously. That's the message we're sending to everyone. Ann Barrett Doyle, a director of Bishop Accountability, U.S.-based nonprofit dedicated to helping victims of clerical abuse, told CNA, the Vatican's delay in issuing a verdict in the Rupnik case inflicts further harm on his victims and scandalizes the faithful. Absolutely. Yep. We hope Pope Francis orders a resolution soon. This is not the transparency he has promised, nor the efficient process that mercy demands. Justice delayed is justice denied. Agreed. Well said. Well said. Whatever the reason for the delay, it's inexcusable. This is a no-brainer. Two former religious sisters, ex-members of the Loyola community Rupnik co-founded, share their testimony and identities publicly for the first time at a press conference earlier this year. An alleged victim told CNA via email Saturday she feels betrayed once again, that she has not received a response from the Vatican a full year after the investigation began. And that once again, no one is taking responsibility for the very serious abuse I suffered. I get it. I get it. I totally get that because I've seen firsthand this kind of lack of concern coming from those in authority in the Catholic Church. I've seen that so many times. Branciani, who is from Italy, submitted her story twice to the Vatican. The second time she did so together with 4 other alleged victims in April. I first announced Rupnik in 1993. In 2021, the church asked me to again give testimony about the abuse I've suffered. Both times there was no response from church authority. But we want to build trust with people, right? She said she hopes for a clear stance in favor of the victims without further ambiguity, causing further suffering and discredit. I hope that the just words of condemnation of the scourge of the abuse of nuns will finally be followed by concrete actions, lacking to date from me and all other victims of Rupnik. Another alleged victim said, for now, she thinks there is a lack of transparency from the Vatican Rupnik case. When I think of what my sisters have gone through, and to some extent me too, I still feel the pain and disappointment, both for the abuse and the way in which it was handled by the authorities. I hope the institution and those who represent it will try with all means possible to build relationships on truth and justice, not with words alone, but above all with the facts. Again, it notes the status of Rupnik. He was incarnated into the Diocese of Slovenia after he was expelled from the Jesuit order for disobedience. Asked about the priest's current whereabouts and the status of his priestly ministry, the Koper Diocese referred CNA to a press release on October 2023, which says he was accepted into the diocese on the basis of the fact that the Bishop of Koper has not received any documents of Reverend Rupnik having been found guilty of the alleged abuses before either an ecclesiastical tribunal or civil court. I'm not buying it. You know why? Pope Francis could make one phone call and say, go ahead and remove them, because Pope Francis does not have to follow canon law. Pope Francis promulgates canon law. Pope Francis is above canon law. Pope Francis does not have to follow canon law. And in many cases, he doesn't follow canon law. And that's fine. But all he has to do is call up this diocese and say, don't worry about it. You don't have to be tied to canon law on this matter. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, remove them from ministry. Pope Francis can do that today. He can do it right now. That's part of papal supremacy. That is a dogma of the Catholic Church per Vatican I. He can interfere in the diocese of any church, any diocese, any bishop, any parish. He can do any of that. He can interfere immediately for whatever reason, and his reasons could be less than holy, and he could still do it according to papal supremacy. And popes have done it. He could easily do it. I don't know why he hasn't. So at the end of the day, there is no excuse, period, end of story. The press release also stated, as long as Reverend Rupnik has not been found guilty in a public trial in court, he enjoys all the rights and duties of diocesan priests. The Holy See Press Office did not respond to CNA's request for information about Rupnik's status, where he is living, at what point the canonical process at the DDF is, and if there are restrictions to his ministry while he is under investigation. There were calls for a Vatican investigation into Rupnik at the time accusations against him became public at the end of 2022, but the Doctrine Dicastery said at the time he could not be investigated because too much time had passed since the alleged abuse. Pope Francis lifted the statute of limitations nearly 1 year later, and the DDF investigation into Rupnik began. Rupnik's case has garnered massive public attention due to his already existing notoriety as a popular Catholic mosaic artist and founder of an art and theology school in Italy. Is that what they call it? That's art? I'm sorry. The stuff he puts out is trash. The priest's work and works in the same style from students of his art school adorn hundreds of churches, shrines, and chapels around the world, to our shame. In the wake of the allegations made against him, a debate was sparked about whether the artist's works ought to be covered, removed, or in the case of photos or prints online, no longer used out of respect for victims of clerical sexual abuse. This is a no-brainer. His work, his art could be the most heavenly thing you've ever seen. You still need to remove it out of respect for the victims of clerical sexual abuse if you want to be taken seriously. And his work isn't heavenly, so you can't even say, well, it's beautiful, so we got to keep it. The Vatican's own communication dicastery has come under fire for continuing to feature Rupnik art on its web pages for saints' feast days. This summer, the lay Catholic fraternal organization Knights of Columbus announced its decision to cover the floor-to-ceiling Rupnik-created mosaics in 2 chapels of St. John Paul National Shrine in Washington, D.C. Just days before the Knights' announcement, Bishop Jean-Marc Micas said while he personally believes the Marian Shrine's Rupnik mosaics should be taken down, he's waiting to make a final decision on their removal in the face of strong opposition. As a first step, the French bishop said Rupnik's mosaics would no longer be lit up during the Lord's nightly rosary procession, as if that really, makes a difference. Well, we're just not going to light it up. Oh, yeah. I'm sure the survivors feel so comforted by that. We're not taking this seriously. We're not. And that's to our shame. But if you see it differently, I want to hear from you. Put it in the comment section. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why I'm wrong on this. I would be happy to correct what I've said. I would be happy to change my opinion here. Tell me why I'm wrong. And if I'm not wrong, if you agree, let me hear from you as well. Put it in the comment section too. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. That's going to do it. See you next time. God bless.